And generally speaking, guys, I don't want to trade my bishops for these knights unless I have a really good reason to do so. So if black is going to start attacking me, I'm probably just going to drop back. And if they want to keep attacking me, I'm probably just going to drop back. Same thing over here. That's probably what my plan is going to be. Sometimes when the bishops aren't defending the knights like this, it makes sense to trade them off because you can mess up the pawn structure or open up the king, something like that. But in this case, black's position is pretty solid. I don't think it makes sense to do that, so I'm going to keep my bishop. Just go back. There's a principle in chess, and it's if your opponent has a cramped position, doesn't have a lot of space, can't really move too much, trading pieces is going to help them. Black's position is very cramped. They don't have a lot of space to work with. So if you imagine, let's say they wanted to move their queen off of the back to connect their rooks. Could they do it? Not right now. If I take this, well, then they can just recapture, and they've basically fixed all their problems. So with all that in mind, I'm not going to trade. I'm going to just drop back and keep black cramped and ask them to figure out how are you going to maneuver your pieces around. Now, of course, there are ways to do it, but I'm not going to make it easy on them. And I think bishop to b3 is the way to do that. If black's going to play g5, it opens up their king. If they're going to play e5, looks like we just take it. And I think there's a tactic here where I can actually take, and take the bishop. So, one thing to keep in mind, whenever you have pieces lined up with other pieces, you always want to keep it in your mind. There could be a tactic here, right? You might look at this position and say, oh, there's no way. There's two pawns in between. But after a simple move like e5, trade, and all of a sudden there's the threat. And then I can sack the knight and take the bishop. And so I didn't want to take that away. Okay, black is going pawn hunting. And I'm going to show you guys how dangerous this is for black. Watch this. They're going to take this. And I'm going to say, go ahead. And this is a common setup. If your opponent's queen comes down here, it attacks your rook, you just slide it over. You've got the knight defending the rook. You've got the bishop defending the knight. Even if the bishop wasn't here, the queen would be defending the knight. And basically what we end up getting is a rook, a knight, a bishop. All of these pieces are developed. And what does black have? Like literally nothing. So I don't think this is going to end well for black. But I'm not going to there's not like an immediate tactic that I see. I'm just going to keep developing. So d4, get a pawn to the center. We're going to bring this bishop out next. Okay. That is questionable because what happens if I play rook to g3? Attacks the queen. If the queen moves back here, do I have a way to win the piece? Maybe not. Yeah, I guess I don't really need to play that. It doesn't quite do anything, so I'll just continue developing. Black wants to take me. That's totally fine. I'll take back. And you're going to see how all of these pieces, it's going to open up tactical opportunities that black doesn't have because all the pieces are stuck on the back. Also, black has to be careful about losing their queen because out here. Like if you imagine if they move their king here or if they try to castle, which looks like they're about to, you have this fork. Right? So that looks pretty good for me. Actually didn't consider that move. Probably should have. So clever move there by my opponent. But the nice thing about when you're following these opening principles, you're putting all your pieces on good squares, you're controlling the center, is that even when something unexpected happens, 9 times out of 10, you have a good way to deal with it. So that's what's so nice about following those opening principles. So in a position like this, one thing that I'm thinking about is the pawn structure difference. So if you look carefully, I have 3 and 3. White has 3 over here, but then they have the 2 and the 1. So what does that tell me? Well, it tells me that this pawn is a potential long-term weakness. It's an isolated pawn. It's much more difficult for white to defend this than some of these other pawns because the pawns can help each other. Okay, so I'm going to definitely be keeping an eye on this. Make black make a decision about the bishop. Okay, they do keep it. And I think I'm going to leave this. So there's a little trap you can do when somebody tries to take a pawn like this. You play b3 and you essentially trap their piece. And then you can move your king over and just take it. So I'm going to leave that, see if black takes that. And in the meantime, I'm going to start thinking about how do I want to relocate my pieces. So I'm going to think about maybe hopping this knight over here. I'm going to play knight to h4. The idea is I want to hop into this square at some point. And I may even, okay, there you go. So they fell for our little trap. We'll play b3. The bishop is trapped. The next move, I'm going to play king b2. Take it. So remember that one. And that also has the benefit that it defends my pawn as well, so I don't have to worry about that. There are rare cases where they could take the pawn and there's some other piece that can assist the bishop in escaping. Doesn't apply here. I did look at this when I played it, but I knew that I could play king b2 and it would be trapped. So we're fine. We also have this really nice square for the knight pretty soon as well. And it helps us get ready to play d5 quickly. h3. Not super concerned. They clearly, don't want to mess with pins and stuff on their knight, which, okay, I get it. I'm just going to strike at the center. The thing about moves like this is like, yes, it takes away one threat. But you can always develop your bishops to other squares, right? And then you end up with, one player wastes a bunch of time and they have a lot of pieces stuck on the back. So that's kind of the downside with this. Now, don't get me wrong. You see grandmasters play moves like this, but they understand when they should and when they shouldn't. I see a lot of beginners just like randomly play h6 and a6 like every game at the first like 2 moves because they don't want to get their knights pinned. That's not really the way to go about it. You kind of want to think ahead of like, okay, is this particular situation, is that pin going to cause me some serious problems? If the answer is yes, that's the situation you would want to play h3 in. This game is just starting. I mean, I can't even go there yet. My opponent doesn't even know if I'm going to go there yet. So it's too early, in my opinion, to play that move. As my time is getting lower and I do want to trade, I'm going to go for this line. Now, normally I would be more hesitant to do this because it's going to open up my king. However, once the queens are traded, kind of in an endgame, I'm not really worried about getting checkmated. And also, I still have 3 against 3, which, even though they're double isolated pawns, they're going to still do a good job of stopping the passed pawns. I'm still going to have my 4 against 2 majority over here. And so this looks like a pretty easy endgame, regardless of the pawn structure weaknesses here. One thing about kings, they actually do a good job of defending pawns like this. That's actually not a threat that I can easily deal with. Now that I'm looking at, like, how am I going to defend that? So already, this is a good example. This is a good example of like, what do you do when you're kind of in a bind? I think we're kind of in a jam here. So what I like to do is, you've checked the basics. Can we defend? No. Can I like block off one of these pieces? No. I started looking for like outside of the box type of move. So like knight to e5. Looks kind of like a weird move. Like I'm still going to lose a pawn here, but that would put the queen in line with my bishop. And then maybe I can, I don't know, play bishop f3, line up on the queen, and we get our pawn back here. That seems like an idea, although my knight's going to be hanging. So don't really like that. Actually, looking at this now, this a3 b4 idea seemed like a terrible idea because I've weakened this diagonal. Now I have problems here. All right, so let's keep thinking. What else can we do outside of the box? Can I take this, play c4 to chase the bishop away, c5 to trap this guy? Does that work? I don't think so, because after c4, black's going to have the option to take here. When I take back, then they have time to save their bishop or do something. Probably just take here. So that doesn't work. But you see what I'm doing? Like I'm looking for, a way out of this bad situation. I'm not seeing it, though. I'm not. Let's play the Dutch. I think I remember reading a comment somebody asked for the Dutch. I don't know a whole lot of theory here, but I've talked so much about don't move your F pawn, and what are we doing here? First move of the game, we're moving our F pawn. So constantly we do need to be aware of this. However, one of the things that you can do when you're worried about queen h5 is put your knight on f6. The knight obviously does a great job of controlling that. Now white is planning on probably taking our knight. So we are going to have to keep an eye on that. We also have kind of the follow-up, g6. So if this ever happens, we could play g6. So as long as we have one of these two options, we should be okay. But sometimes as the game goes on, things change, and that's what you have to be careful for. I don't know if this is the best move. Let's keep an eye. All right, we still have g6, so we should be okay. Let's go ahead and trade this and play bishop e7. We're going to need the support here, I think, to get rid of this pin. So let's do that. And so takes. I'm okay because I can take with the queen. And again, I still have that g6 move. Okay, That's what I'm... If I didn't play bishop e7 here, and I allowed, like, let's say I played a random move over here. Let me go back for a second. I played a random move over here and allowed this, and I had to take with my g pawn. Then that queen h5 move all of a sudden is a killer move, and I'm in trouble. So that's why it's important that I keep this available to me. Okay, so bishop d3, what I notice is it blocks the rook, which means I can take this pawn. However, there would be a tactic where the bishop could take, and then I'd lose my knight. But do I really care about that? Because it's still a trade. It's basically a big trade, and it would open up this move. I think I actually like. I think I am going to take that. And the primary reason is because at the end of all this trading, this move is very powerful. Because if the king has to move here, I've essentially taken these pieces out of the game. I guess white could play the rook back here, which is still a big trade, but I'm still fine with that. Maybe it's better to just keep developing. I don't know, but I will go ahead and go for, yeah, that's what they're going to do. And here we go. Check. And I think white's only move is to go here. If you play king d2, I've now, like I said, eliminated these two pieces from the game. You can't use your rook because it's stuck. You can't move your knight because it's pinned. Yeah, this is not the way for white. So now I'm just going to develop, and white has to figure out how can they ever use these two pieces. Otherwise, they're going to play the rest of the game with only a rook. This idea of allowing a pawn to get in front of your king is actually a really nice defensive idea. Notice how that pawn is totally blocking... Wow, what a move. Notice how that pawn is totally blocking my rook and queen, to where I can't actually get to the king because my own pawn's in the way. So this is a good idea by my opponent to allow this to happen. Now, I don't know what's going on here. It looks to me like there's a thread here, but it doesn't really do much as long as I don't get forked. So I don't want to go here. I could sacrifice this, but I think I want to keep my rook supporting the pawn here. So probably king to e2 looks like a good move. By the way, when you're facing a knight, if you ever go next to it straight, you don't have to worry about any checks. If you go diagonally, there's always going to be checks. And if you go straight with the space in between, there's always going to be checks. But this is kind of a pattern you want to remember. One straight square away, I guess would be how you would say that. There's no checks from the knight. So it's, if you're in time pressure, that's a good one to remember. Wow, okay. So our opponent is just being very aggressive. The issue with that move is I don't see a follow-up for black. Like, yes, it's going to weaken my king, but what's the follow-up? And I don't see it. So I'm going to take it. And, okay. All right. So whenever this happens, what I like to do is try to figure out how do I consolidate my king as quickly as possible. Get it safe. So if somebody sacrifices a piece like this, you want to make sure that you get your king to safety. So I think I'm going to play the move knight to g3. Kind of adds a piece in front of the king and also takes away these squares from the bishop. And I'm going to try to play h3 and get rid of that bishop. And if my queen can come over here, then my queen's also defending, my knight's defending, my queen's defending, and I've created another piece, which gets me closer to the end game. All of those things make me feel much better. So that's the idea. Knight g3 followed by h3. I think I will take this. I could also continue with my original plan of h3, but because black has just given me this really nice, powerful move, I think I'll just do that instead. And I'm actually going to take with the rook instead of the bishop. If I take with the bishop, it's an obvious check. The opponent's king just has to move, and that's about it. But if I take with the rook, I'm threatening a discovered check, and I'm threatening to take the knight over here. So it's much more powerful. So here's a good example of, I think a lot of beginners, when they see this, they would just immediately take with the bishop and think, oh, it's a check, it's a free pawn, let's take it, right? Here's an example of how creating that discover check is much more powerful. And now we're going to see, I have lots of good options here. One is to take the knight with check. Another, take the bishop with check. And another that I think is even better maybe is rook here with check, and I take the queen. Now, this is an interesting situation because if I take here, how many points do I get? 3 points. Or if I take here, how many points do I get? 3 points essentially for free, and the game goes on. If I go here, the king moves, I take this. and then the rook takes. I got 9 points, but I lost 5. So I got 4 points. So it's slightly better. Sometimes in a position like this, you're low on time. Rather than trying to calculate the best option, find one that you see that's pretty good, which I see, and do it. So I'm going to take here. Yes, I lose my queen, but I'm getting a rook, and I'm getting another rook, which is an even trade, essentially. 2 rooks for a queen. Pretty even. That was pretty easy for me to calculate. So I stopped calculating all the other lines. I just focused on that one. It did it. Why? Because it takes me to an end game that's very simple, very easy for me to not blunder. All I have to do is watch out for the dark squares, essentially. So all these pieces are good, right? And here we go. Let's try to force a trade. Let's try to hunt down some pawns, get a queen. Should be a relatively easy win at this point. So good example there of how sometimes just go with the simple option that you can see quickly, avoid the other ones.